I'm Beth. Standing in the middle of the once vibrant party, now filled with an awkward silence, I watch as the pieces of my relationship shatter before my eyes. Evan has just arrived, and the shock on Marin's and Daniel's faces is palpable. It's as if time has stopped, and the truth I've been waiting to expose is finally out in the open. A few weeks ago, my life seemed perfectly settled. I had a stable job in financial consulting, a trendy apartment in the heart of the city with modern decor that I'd painstakingly curated over the years, and a boyfriend, Daniel Reed, whom I'd been with for 4 years. We met through mutual friends at a fancy rooftop lounge. The drinks were overpriced, and the view of the city lights was supposed to be inspiring, but most people there, including us, were just looking for a connection. Daniel was charming. He had a way of making me feel special without even trying. He remembered the little things about me, like my favorite coffee order and the book I'd been meaning to read. In the first 2 years of our relationship, everything was easy. We talked about our future, about having a family, and about getting a dog when we were more settled. Last winter, he proposed to me during a romantic trip to the mountains. We both cried, and when we called his parents on FaceTime, his mother was overjoyed. It seemed like our story was headed towards a perfect ending. But then, about 6 months ago, things started to change. Daniel began mentioning his ex-girlfriend, Ava, more frequently. They had dated in college for 2 years and broke up when she moved to another city for a high-profile job. I was told it was a clean break, just a part of his past. At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd say things like, "Ava would have loved this place," during our dinners. Then, I noticed her liking his Instagram posts and leaving comments. One day, Daniel casually mentioned that he'd run into Ava at a business event and they'd grabbed coffee to catch up. I trusted Daniel, and I believed in being mature. I thought it was just an innocent encounter. But as time went on, their meetings became more frequent. Coffee turned into lunch, and lunch turned into drinks with friends, and Ava was always there. I started to feel like an outsider in my own relationship. Exactly 1 week before Daniel's 32nd birthday, he dropped the bombshell. "I invited Ava to my birthday party," he said, pouring himself a glass of wine as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "Please be understanding." I forced a smile and said, "Sure, no problem." What he didn't know was that earlier that day, I'd done some digging. 2 weeks prior, after Daniel mentioned Ava for the 3rd time in a way that made me feel left out, I decided to look her up. I checked her LinkedIn, Instagram, and all her public profiles. In less than 10 minutes, I found out that Ava wasn't single. She had a boyfriend named Ryan Thompson. According to her social media, they'd been together for 9 months, with lots of beach vacations and anniversary posts that made me sick to my stomach. So, on that Monday afternoon, before Daniel came home with his news, I sent Ryan a message. It was polite but also loaded with meaning. "Hi Ryan, we haven't met, but I'm Beth, Daniel Reed's fiancé. Daniel is having his birthday party this Saturday at the Riverfront Loft at 7 p.m. He mentioned inviting Ava, and I thought it would be nice if you came too. The more the merrier. Hope to see you there." Ryan responded within an hour, grateful for the invite and excited to come. The next few days were a facade of normalcy. Daniel was busy planning his party, texting me about the guest list, the food, and the music. He'd rented a beautiful loft with exposed brick and twinkling string lights, a place that would look amazing in photos. He was in full birthday planning mode, getting his hair cut, his nails trimmed, and picking out the perfect outfit. On Friday night, as he paced around our apartment, checking things off his list, I asked as casually as I could, "Did Ava RSVP?" "Yeah," he said, barely looking up. "She'll be there." I paused and asked, "Is she bringing anyone?" He stopped abruptly and said, "No," a bit too quickly. I shrugged and said, "Just wondering if she had a +1. He replied with confidence, "She's been focused on work. She's not seeing anyone." I nodded, but inside, I knew he was lying. Saturday arrived, and the weather was perfect, which seemed so unfair considering my world was about to fall apart. We arrived at the venue early to set up. Daniel was beaming, looking like he was on top of the world. He adjusted the lights, tested the sound system, and joked with the staff. I watched him and thought, if he can be this calm about inviting his ex, what else has he been hiding? Guests started arriving around 7:15. Daniel's parents were the first to come. His mother hugged me tightly, as if she could sense my unease. His father shook Daniel's hand and said, 32 is a big one, as if it meant he was finally going to be a responsible adult. Daniel's younger sister, Emily, arrived with her friends. She gave me a strange look, like she knew something was up. My friend, Sarah, was the only one I'd warned. I'd texted her, tonight might get interesting. She showed up at 7:30 and mouthed, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but I was far from okay. I was ready. At 7:40, Ava walked in. She was tall, with long, shiny hair and a designer dress that made her look like a model. She held a small gift bag and a bouquet of flowers. Daniel's face lit up when he saw her. "Ava," he said, walking towards her like he was in a trance. She smiled and said, "Happy birthday, Dan." I'd never called him that. She hugged him for a long time, and I saw his hands gently press against her back. He took the flowers as if they were the most precious thing in the world. Ava finally noticed me and said, "Oh, you must be Beth." Daniel turned, as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Yeah, Beth. This is Ava." It was like I was an afterthought. I shook her hand and said, "Nice to meet you." She replied, "Daniel's told me a lot about you." I forced a smile and said, "He's mentioned you too." I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, but then Daniel was already pulling her towards the bar, introducing her to everyone and laughing too loudly at her jokes. I watched them interact, and a sense of clarity washed over me. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was a rekindling of something that should have stayed in the past. Then, at 8:10, the doors opened again, and Ryan walked in. He was a handsome man with a confident stride. He scanned the room, looking for Ava. I intercepted him and said, "Ryan, I'm so glad you came." He smiled and said, "Thanks for the invite. This place is great." I tilted my head towards the bar and said, "Ava's over there." He grinned and said, "Perfect. I'm going to surprise her." He walked over to the bar, where Ava was standing close to Daniel, laughing at his jokes. Ryan put his arms around Ava's waist and kissed her cheek. "Babe, why didn't you tell me you had a party tonight?" "I almost made other plans," he said loudly. The look on Ava's face was priceless. Her smile froze, and Daniel's head snapped up like he'd been hit. Ava recovered quickly and said, "Ryan. You made it." Daniel just stared, and Ryan, not realizing the tension, looked around and saw Daniel. "Who's this?" he asked. Ava's fingers tightened on her drink, and Daniel stammered, "We used to date in college." Ryan's smile faded, and he said slowly, "You didn't mention you were coming to your ex's birthday party." Ava blushed and said, "It was last minute." Daniel nodded too quickly and said, "It's just a group thing." Ryan looked between them and said, "Right, a group thing." Ava's eyes were filled with a mix of anger, panic, and humiliation. She said through clenched teeth, "Daniel, can I talk to you privately?" She didn't wait for an answer and walked towards the back hallway. Daniel followed, giving Ryan a look that was half apology, half plea. Ryan stood there, holding his gift bag, looking confused. He asked me, "Did I do something wrong?" I looked him in the eye and said, "No, you did everything right." I waited for a few minutes before following them. I could hear their voices clearly in the hallway. "You didn't think it mattered that you have a girlfriend?" Ava was saying, her voice full of anger. Daniel exhaled and said, "We were just catching up." Ava hissed, "You've been texting me for months, Daniel. Coffee, lunch, drinks. You told me you missed me." I felt sick to my stomach. This was the part Daniel had never told me. Ava continued, you said breaking up was the biggest mistake you ever made. Daniel said softly, I was being nostalgic. It didn't mean anything. Ava snapped back, then why didn't you tell me about Beth? Why didn't you tell me you were engaged? Why didn't you tell Ryan about this party? Daniel's voice hardened, because you knew. I heard Ava say, I don't know. I just missed what we had. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked back into the party. The party was in chaos. Ryan was still at the bar, looking shocked. Daniel's mother was looking around, clearly worried. Guests were whispering to each other. Ava came out first, her makeup slightly smudged. She went straight to the bar and poured herself a glass of champagne. Daniel followed, his jaw clenched. He walked up to Ryan and grabbed his arm, saying something under his breath. Ryan pulled away and said, what is going on? Daniel leaned in and said, we should leave. Ava snapped, no, don't. Don't you dare leave like I'm the problem. Then Ava looked at me and said, you did this? You invited him. I looked her in the eye and said, I invited Ryan because he's your boyfriend. I thought he should be here. She trembled and said, you wanted to humiliate me. I leaned in and said, no, I wanted the truth to come out. She hissed, you're petty. I smiled and said, I'm tired of being asked to be okay with things that are disrespectful. I wasn't competing with you, I was trusting him. She said, I didn't even know he was engaged. And that was the moment I realized that Daniel had been keeping me in the dark. The party never recovered. By 9 o'clock, half the guests had left. Daniel's co-workers were the first to go, followed by friends who made up excuses. The once lively loft now felt empty and cold. Daniel's mother came up to me twice and asked, is everything okay? In that tone that meant she already knew the answer but didn't want to hear it. His father stopped talking to me altogether. Emily just watched, saying nothing. Ryan and Ava left together around 8:45, not speaking to each other. Daniel stayed, which told me all I needed to know. At 10:30, I called an Uber. Daniel didn't ask where I was going, and he didn't try to stop me. That night, I slept alone. Daniel didn't come home on Saturday or Sunday. I texted him on Sunday morning, we need to talk, but he didn't respond. On Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Emily. What the hell did you do? She demanded. I said calmly, I invited Ava's boyfriend to the party. There was a long silence on the other end. She finally said, Ava's staying with our parents. She's a mess. She says you ambushed her. I asked, did she tell you Daniel's been telling her he missed her? That breaking up was a mistake? Emily sighed and said, she said they'd been talking. I repeated, talking? That's one way to put it. Emily then said, she loves you, Beth. I closed my eyes and said, does she? Because from where I'm standing, she's been living in the past while I was trying to plan a future with her brother. Emily didn't argue. She said, she wants the ring back. The words hit me hard, but I knew it was coming. I said, she can come get it herself. Emily said, give her a few days. I didn't make any promises. Daniel showed up on Wednesday evening. He looked like a mess, with unkempt hair, wearing sweatpants and an old hoodie. He said flatly, I'm here for my things. I muted my computer and turned to him. So that's it? We're done? I asked. He winced and said, you humiliated me. I said evenly, you invited your ex-girlfriend to your birthday party, an ex you've been emotionally involved with for months. I didn't humiliate you, I stopped pretending. He shook his head and said, you knew what would happen. I replied, yes, because I was the only one paying attention. He dropped onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. I didn't lie, he muttered. I said, you told me she wasn't seeing anyone. You told me she was just a friend. Meanwhile, she thought you were available, and her boyfriend didn't even know about the party. He said. I got confused. I stood up and said, confused? We've been together for 4 years, engaged, and comfortable. And then Ava showed up, and you let her back into your life without even talking to me. He said quickly, I never cheated on you. I blurted out, you were going to. I continued, you wanted to see if the spark was still there. You wanted to test it. And if Ryan hadn't shown up, what then? Another late-night conversation? A kiss? He didn't answer because he couldn't. I said quietly, that's why you're angry. Not because I embarrassed you, but because I exposed something you weren't ready to admit to yourself. His shoulders slumped, and he said, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I replied, and yet, you made every choice that led us here. He stood up slowly and went to the bedroom to pack. By the time he left that night, our future together was over. The following Monday, his parents came with him to help him move out. His father wouldn't look at me. His mother hugged me tightly and whispered, I'm sorry. The engagement was officially over. I kept the ring, not out of spite, but because it represented the truth of our relationship. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that Daniel and Ava tried to get back together, but it only lasted 2 weeks. Ava went back to Ryan, and he forgave her. About a month after the breakup, Daniel texted me, I'm sorry for how things ended. You deserve better. I read the message and didn't respond. The chapter was closed. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to work. I started going to the gym again and let Sarah drag me out when I wanted to stay home and wallow. I deleted Daniel from social media, not out of anger, but because I needed to move on. Someone asked me if I regretted inviting Ryan to the party. I thought about it and said, no, I don't regret it. Daniel made his choices long before that night. He chose to be unfaithful emotionally, to lie by omission, and to choose nostalgia over honesty. All I did was bring the truth to light. The apartment was quiet after Daniel left. It wasn't empty, it was just free of the lies and the false hopes. I boxed up the things we'd bought together, things that once represented our future but now were just reminders of the past. I knew that I couldn't build a future with someone who was still living in his memories. And I was okay with that.